I think I partnered out of fear, because it was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe if I have a partner, they'll compliment me and it'll help. And so if you're going to partner, I think it's so much better. I just heard Seth Godin say, I don't work with someone until I work with them. And what he means by that is he doesn't hire someone until they do a project for him and he sees the results. And so I think the same thing is so true with partnerships. Like, test it out, do a joint venture together. Once I had my own LLC and I would just do joint ventures with people, I could decide on my own marketing, the direction of the business, all that stuff. The only decisions we needed to make are around the property itself, that we're partnering on. And that's kind of spelled out in the joint venture agreement, who's doing what.
I think a lot of people, their access or their way to get into real estate is through partnerships.
Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investors Podcast. I'm your okay guest, Kirby Atwell. But more importantly, with me as always are the smart, charismatic, successful, and incredibly handsome hosts, Tom and Mark.
Wow, that was good.
Appreciate the compliments.
Yeah. I watched you look away when you ad-libbed too. Like you had to, that was awesome. Well, today's episode is awesome. I love, Kirby and I go pretty far back, and we found out today we played football together at one time. So I'm pretty excited about talking about that as well too. But
dude, Michigan City.
Yeah,
where I just came from there. I'm happy to talk about that. We haven't talked about the south suburbs of Chicago in a while. Happy we threw some love there. We're all over the map here.
Yeah, Kirby's
an El Paso reference.
Yeah, Kirby's he's super successful, and he just wants to add value to other people, and that's why his podcast has been so successful to us well too. So I'm happy to have him here.
Yeah, anyone who's I bitch about driving from the northwest side of Chicago to Roselle, and he came from Valpo, so I'll shut my mouth.
Yep.
So, all right, let's jump in. What's the housing provider tip of the week?
All right, so I had this housing provider tip from last week when we had Taft West on, but we skipped it. But the CIC property management class, it's a 3 or 4 day class that anyone could take. I think they make you pay $50 online, and they give you back the money when you get there. But the value you get out of those 10 or 15 hours that you're in there is a huge jumpstart to if you've never been a landlord before, especially in Cook County. So go to CIC.com or Google up Community Investment Corp and property management, and you'll see those courses. I think they even offer them online now as well too.
Yeah, no, you make everyone at GC do that, right?
Yes. Yeah, so we make everyone go through it because there's a lot of updates and kind of street level information about just how to deal with dumb problems that are going on around the city that you need to know as a landlord.
Yeah. Side note, I like that concept of like if you're having a meetup and like I don't really want to charge people, I want them to have skin in the game. I like that idea of they got to pay, they'll get their money back when they show up, like fully refundable deposit. Like
so when
you go to meet up, like 90 people sign up and 30 show up because it's free type of thing. It's a pain in the ass for everybody.
Well, that's what we do with the Grit Series. The training we do here every other month is I just charge $10. Like it's really easy to say, yes, I'll attend and then not blow it off. But yes, get out your credit card, pay the $10. And then it's not even, you've committed a little more. I bet you a lot of people open up the credit card thing and they're like, I'll do this later. And then those are the people that are never going to show up. So it's not to make money. It's simply just get someone's buy-in of the situation.
Yeah, nice little tip there. Double tip.
Yeah, look at that.
There you go. All right, lead it in. Who's our guest today?
All right, today's guest, real estate investor for 20 years, served in the Army for 10 years. He's invested in Illinois, does a lot in Northwest Indiana, and has a super successful podcast, Living Off Rentals. He also drove almost 2 hours to be with us here in the Underground today, so I feel extra special as well. Welcome, today's guest, Kirby Atwell.
Thanks. It's great to be here, guys.
And how long did it take you to get here? Because I'm honored because of that, too.
About an hour and a half, especially with traffic right now.
Oh, man, I'm honored. So we appreciate you coming out here.
No, it's my pleasure.
All right, we're going to start right here. Top of your Instagram, it says, a year from now, you wish you would have wished you started today. Tell us why that's in your profile.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes. It resonates with me so much because on my podcast, one of the questions I ask is like, what do you wish you had done different? And it's almost always the same answer. I wish I would have just started earlier, And so I tend to deliberate on stuff a lot, and I think it's at my detriment. And I think people are better off if they can just like think about it and start taking action today. And a year from now, you're going to be so much happier you did.
Well, it's very general. We talk about that a lot of times on here. Like, can that be coached? Like, can that be, are people like determined to just start when they're ready? Or is it something that they could be coached, coerced, whatever into?
I think it is a skill. I think, everyone leans one way or the other. There's like the the typical like, powerful CEO guy who's just like breaking things and moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then there's people, and I fall probably more on this end of the spectrum where they just sit and deliberate and, think about things way too long. But I think if you're aware of it, the whole goal, I think, of coaching is just self-awareness, so that you can be intentional about the things that you areas where you lack, and you can be intentional about improving those, and then, or ignoring them and just capitalizing on what you're good at.
It's funny. They talk a lot about, people try to work on their weaknesses when it, like, sometimes it's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, screw that.
Yeah,
you're weak at it. Hire someone for that and go big on this part of your life that you're awesome at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We were just talking before we started rolling, Lance and I, about house hacking. I was like, yeah, if I would have just bought all this crap in 2012, like,
exactly.
Right? Same thing, right? 10 years earlier, like, oh, it'd be a different story right now.
Yeah, I know, for sure. All right, well, the start, you have such an interesting story. We're about the same age. You start off in the Army, you went to West Point. Like, that's awesome in itself. Like, how'd you end up there? Was that a boyhood dream? Did you just really go to school? Like,
yeah, it's a good question. I grew up in the south suburbs, Chicago and New Lenox. And growing up, I always kind of knew two things. One was that I wanted to be in the military, and one was that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, which, those two things don't typically go hand in hand. But my my dad was in the Army. All my grandparents were pretty much did some form of military service, great grandparents. So like, I just I was exposed to that a lot, and it just kind of spoke to me, and I wanted to serve, but I knew that I didn't want it to be a career. So my dad was enlisted, and he's like, enlisted guys are the ones who work the hardest. If you want to go in the Army, you should be an officer, because then you can just sit around, drink coffee, and, do nothing all day and get paid a lot more for it. So that was his impression of what officers did in the Army. And so he's like, and if you're going to be an officer, you might as well go to West Point, because it's, a good way to get your commission. So I didn't think I'd get in. I was not like valedictorian in my class. And I think like 30% of my West Point class were either valedictorian or salutatorian of their high school class. It's insane. And so got in kind of the back door through football. I played football, and they sent me to prep school for a year because I wasn't qualified to go to West Point. And they're like, if you can, increase your test scores and everything there and play football for a year, then you can get in. And so did that, and then got cut the first week from the football team that I got to West Point. So, but it got me in the door. And so I did my 4 years there, got commissioned as an officer in the Army, and served 6 years as an officer then.
I went to West Point, like, as a tourist, like, when I was 10.
Oh,
I
really?
left there that summer, like, I am going to West Point. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do. I remember I bought the T-shirt. I wore the hell out of it, and I got through like the first quarter, because I remember they're like, "Yeah, you just have to have good grades." I'm like, this is it. This is my journey. I'm going to get awesome grades from here through high school. And I think I got past like the first quarter. Like, I was on like C average. I'm like, all right, West Point's out.
Yeah, I'll enlist.
Oh, I got one more question. You went to Lincoln Way?
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
2000.
So did you play in the state game?
I did. I was a sophomore that year, but I was moved up for playoffs.
So 𝗬𝗃𝗶𝗵𝗁 wrecked us, dude. I was Addison Trail. Same.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, we never connected on
I
that.
didn't realize that.
That's like my
Wow.
polk high 4 touchdowns. Like, just playing
being on the team.
in ISU on the team. Like that was my big thing. So I was a junior.
Okay.
And we got wrecked. I think it was 42-6 at halftime. all of our best players though got busted for drinking, like, after we won the the regional against Naperville Central, like 2 weeks before. So we had 4 of our starters that went both ways out that game. So we shot ourselves in the foot.
I should send those guys a Christmas card, because that's why I got a state
There you go.
championship. So.
Yeah, for real. 𝗬𝗃𝗶𝗵𝗁, dude. It's funny. That's like, I don't know how I remember
Yeah.
that name, but it just popped up when you said New Lenox. I'm like,
That's
oh,
funny. Interesting.
So going to West Point, where's the entrepreneurial spirit here? Like, you're at West Point, you're in college. In the back of your head, you're like, all right, are you starting to carve out that path of what happens after the 4 years there?
Yeah, good question. So, they don't talk about entrepreneurship a whole lot at West Point. It's kind of like you do what we tell you to do. But it used to be an engineering school up until the 70s, and then they started allowing or offering liberal arts degrees. And so I majored in business management there and got some exposure to business there. Still didn't know what I wanted to do, but my influence growing up was my mom owned an insurance brokerage in Frankfurt, and built it from scratch, you know, just like no clients to start with. And then she built it up slowly over time, and it's been really successful. She still does that today. And I was really attracted to like that kind of eat what you kill mentality. You know, she could set her own hours. She got paid based on, you know, her results. And I was really attracted to that. So I knew I wanted to do something like that. But then once I got into my first job in the Army after graduation, this was 2006, I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad, like everybody does who gets addicted to real estate, and read it, and it just resonated with me. And I was like, real estate is what I want to do. So that's when I bought, like a week after reading that book, I went out and bought my first rental property while I was in the Army.
There you go. 7 days. Go do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So where's the first property?
Oh, it was... I mean, I tell this story and people are like, wow, you were an idiot.
Continue.
But I read that book, and I like got the idea that, well, as long as you buy real estate, it's going to make money over time. So I had no idea how to run numbers or anything. It's 2006, mind you. So like stuff sits on the market for 10 seconds. So I get home to the house where I was living with 4 other buddies, and across the street, there's a for sale sign in the yard. So I get out of my truck, don't even go inside. I walk across the street and knock on the door, and I'm like, I saw your for sale sign. I want to buy your house. And they're like, our realtor put that up. Like, this isn't how it works. Like, you gotta like have a realtor. They're like, we don't really have a price yet. The realtor hasn't even told us what we should list. And I was like, well, whatever it is, just let me know, because I want to buy this. And so they call me back, and they're like, well, it's going to be $101,000. And I mean, I'm in El Paso, Texas, so everything's really cheap. And so I was like, all right, let's do it. And so I found out there's like a closing process and all that stuff. And then got my first tenant, and I thought you paid rent after the month was over. Like, I didn't realize, like, because I had never rented a house before. I was in the Army, you know, and I was living with 4 buddies, and one of them owned the house. So I rent it to this 𝗬𝘃 who you know, he's a sergeant in the Army, his family. And like, I printed a lease offline, and then at the end of the month, I go and collect my first rent payment. So then at the end of the lease, I was a month shy. I didn't even realize it till afterwards. I'm like, wait a second. I'm calculating it out. I'm like, I didn't get a month's worth of rent because I didn't realize that rent's paid up front. That's how dumb I was with my first property. So yeah, it was
Now, did you know to use the VA loan? Did you?
No. No. It was a no doc loan, like fresh out of college, like, you know, 100% financing. It was, everything about it. Like, I was just so lucky I was stationed in El Paso, because that market just doesn't change. It's like so stable, low cost. If I had been stationed in Hawaii or California first, I would have been screwed. I would have bought something that, you know,
lost
a year
30%
later.
of its value
Yeah,
the next year.
exactly. So, yeah.
How long did you hold on to that for?
For about 10 years or 12 years. I sold it right after I got married, and it sold for like $120,000. I mean, it was like nothing really changed. It cash flowed like maybe $150, $200. So it wasn't terrible, but it was a good one to learn on.
It got you in the door, right?
Exactly.
All right. So even through these mistakes, then do you go buy another single family? Like, are you addicted at this point? And also, I'm assuming you have some sort of job, right? Like, you're still
in the military. Yeah, exactly. So I was fresh in the military at that point. I ended up buying another property that I lived in while I was there, and then turned that one into a rental as well. And then I was stationed in Hawaii after that. So it was lucky that, you know, I bought those properties while I was in El Paso, where it was cheap. It was right before the downturn. Downturn happens, and then I get stationed in Hawaii. So now properties are much cheaper there. I spent like a year then looking for just like a really good deal, because I learned so much on those. And I was reading more books and everything, and learning a lot more. And, you know, in Hawaii then, I bought a condo, 2-bedroom, 2-bath on the beach. It was a view of the water in Honolulu for $225,000. So it was from a bank. It was listed on the MLS. It was listed for, I think, $275 or $280. I put in the offer at $225. They didn't even counter. They were just like, this was 2009. So banks were just like freaking out, and turnkey, and kept that one for about the same amount of time, and sold it for like $425 then. So
should you have held that one longer? Where are we at today? I know you've had to look.
Yeah, it's, I mean, every year it just goes up and up. I mean, they're not making a whole lot more land in Hawaii.
So when do you get to Chicago? When do you start? Do you come home at all? And
So I served 6 years as an officer. 2011 is when I got out. I was in Japan at the time, came home to Chicago, and I knew I wanted to get into real estate. So when I was in Japan, getting out of the Army, I made appointments with realtors downtown Chicago to look at properties, like the day after I got home. So I got home on a Wednesday. Thursday, I was riding around with realtors looking at properties, and I wanted to jump into it full time. I was like, this is what I want to do. So bought my first rental in Chicago pretty quickly, and then decided to partner with a couple friends and start a flipping company in Chicago in 2011. And so we flipped from 2011 to 2016 about 70 properties all around Chicago. And that's when I really learned, a lot of the background in real estate.
Now, was that 𝗬𝘗𝗃𝗃?
Yeah. Yeah.
I always thought that was a cool name too.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, we formed 𝗦𝘃𝗃𝗃𝗃 Homes and Realty, and did it. We thought flipping was the way to make a bunch of money. We thought it's flashy, like you see it on TV. People are flipping these houses and making all this money, and it turned into kind of a giant treadmill, is what I associate it to. You don't own any assets, and it took me 5 years to realize this, that everything we kept making, we'd make more and more money, but we'd grow the business more and more, and it just kept going back into the business. And so after 5 years, I had nothing to show for it. I was in the same place financially that I was when I started. Learned a lot, had some great relationships, and that's when I first started seeing, what you guys were doing during that time. And so that's when I really transitioned in 2016 to rental properties.
Well, you had two partners. I'd love to hear what made them good partners or what didn't make them good partners, I guess, because I think a lot of people, their access their way to get into real estate is through partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a lot of pros and cons to the partnership. I think the challenge that I see with most partnerships, and this was for us too, is none of us really knew what we were doing in the beginning. And so it's you see people who, I don't know what I'm doing, you don't know what you're doing, so let's partner together and figure it out together, And so
you just described 80% of all meetups.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I partnered out of fear, because it was I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe if I have a partner, they'll compliment me and it'll help. And so I think if you're going to partner, I think it's so much better. I just heard Seth Godin say, I don't work with someone until I work with them. And what he means by that is he doesn't hire someone until they do a project for him and he sees the results. And so I think the same thing is so true with partnerships. Test it out, do a joint venture together. So we jumped into an LLC together and we were married, and luckily it was a husband and wife that I partnered with initially. And they were good friends of mine from high school. And, luckily we got along really well, but every decision, the marketing component, the any investment, it was these committee meetings all the time. Instead of once I had my own LLC and I would just do joint ventures with people, I could decide on my own marketing, the direction of the business, all that stuff. The only decisions we needed to make are around the property itself, that we're partnering on. And that's kind of spelled out in the joint venture agreement, who's doing what. So it just took a lot more energy, I guess, and time than if we had kind of just had our own separate entities, but joint ventured on specific things, if that makes sense.
What you did a bunch, you did flips, smaller ones, and you did some pretty big ones too, dollar-wise. What's the difference or advice you might give what's the difference in your experience in doing those smaller versus large projects, and what advice to people that are getting into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we started, our first one was on Parliament Avenue in Tinley Park, and it was a great deal. Again, 2011, people are giving away houses at the time. It was listed on the MLS, got it for $50,000 below asking price. And it was just an outdated house, needed a clean out. So that's how we started, and we started doing some of those, and they worked really well in the beginning. But like I said, like everything was going back in the business, and we're like, man, we need more cash coming in. So we started looking at our spreadsheet, and we're like, okay, if we can make a 20% return on these smaller properties, these mid-tier, kind of mid-market properties, what if we could make a 20% return on $1 million property or multi-million-dollar property? Those numbers looked a lot bigger. So, in your mind, it's the same thing when you don't have the experience. But we started looking at those, and mostly on the north side of Chicago, higher end suburbs or the city. And we started jumping into those. And what we realized is that the projects were much bigger rehabs, so a lot more can go wrong. The finishes, to buy a nice stainless steel refrigerator, that cost compared to a Viking refrigerator, it's not like it'll be, 50% more or 20% more. It's like
it's 5X.
Yeah, it's 10X, 5X, 10X for sure. Like and that's with everything. Like it's not like just a little bit more because it's high end. It's like the cost just skyrocketed. And then the pool of buyers that can afford those high end properties is much smaller. They're much more picky. You do they get it under contract, do their inspection. They want $50,000 worth of repairs as opposed to $2,000 worth of repairs that we had with the mid-tier flips. So totally different ball game. And the numbers on the spreadsheet just never panned out to be reality in most cases. So, so my advice is if you're doing flips, I would stick to where most people can afford it. Don't do the cheapest of the cheap, but don't do the super high end. And I think you're going to do much better that way.
You got any feedback on that? That's something you've.
I generally agree with that. Like, especially if you're starting out, like we post on Instagram like these high end stuff we do, and people always ask me about it, and it's like, it's a grind. Like, there's also it's also not super scalable. I'll never do more than, on the high end stuff. Let's say we have 5 projects going on, 2 of them are apartments. One's a bungalow in Portage, and 2 of them are high end. Like I can never do more than 2 of those at a time because if shit goes bad, there's no plan B.
Yeah.
Like you have to sell that home. You cannot rent it. There's no.
Yeah.
So like, okay, can I swallow 1? Can I maybe swallow 2? You can't swallow I think it just gets to a point where you can't do it. And the other thing too is like the liquidity on this is insane.
Yeah.
Like the capital, it's so capital intensive. You have. The money up front, you're putting down whatever. Even if you're using a Renovo of the world, even if someone's giving you 90% LTC, you're still putting down 10%. The interest on it's going to be almost 6 figures if it's a year-long project at high interest rate. So you got to have another $100K sitting around just to pay the mortgage. You got to pay the tax, all the other holding costs. And then with these construction loans, you got to pay everything and get reimbursed. Like you're buying the appliances, you're buying the cabinets. You're always out $200K.
Yeah.
Like you're always, no matter what part of the project is, you're always just out on top of what you've already put in.
Yeah.
And then if you go 80K over budget, that's out of your pocket. No one's helping except you. So like I get wholesalers all the time or agents like, oh, you're gonna make a killing on this. Why are you nickel and dime on the front? It's like I'm not nickel and dime.
Yeah.
Like I'm protecting my ass here. Like this is
exactly.
It's a huge. You should make a huge amount of money because of everything that goes into it. It's insane.
And if you calculate the daily interest too, I mean, it's so depressing. Somebody doesn't show up for a day. You're like, that
an
just
inspector doesn't show in 2 weeks. And it's like, all right, cool. It's $5,000. Like we could have gone to Lake Geneva and now.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's insane. Like it's like every day.
Yep.
So no, it's like everyone always thinks like it's so cool and you make so much money and it is super lucrative, but it's also like it's tough. And then we talked about this yesterday, actually. There's not a line in the spreadsheet for mental taxation, right? Like there's this pure mental tax to this that's like, you lose a lot more sleep than you do on that 150K flip, right?
Absolutely.
Well, in that time period though, even up to 2014, it was very unpredictable what the appraisers were going to do on the back end. Mm-hmm. Coming out of the Great Recession, like that was your biggest enemy was that appraiser because they were being so cautious and because they watched so many of their buddies get in trouble or go down or lose their license.
It swung all the way.
Yeah, the pendulum swung all the way. So that was what I always told people. That last 10% is just for flipping was the scariest part, because especially when you're getting into bigger numbers, 300,000, 400,000, or if you're up $1 million, like it could be $150,000 swing just because there's
10%. Appraisals are gonna be off 10% just subjectively on a $1.5 million home. Like,
and the problem you had was there wasn't that many great comps. All your comps were short sales and bank owned. Like even up in 2014, like that was still half the market that you were having to fight through and go off market and find things that close that you're not sure that this guy doesn't know about. Like that was challenges you're up against.
Great point.
So cash wise, did you have hard money? Was all money come out of your pocket for all those flips that you guys were working on? How'd you guys finance that stuff?
It was a combination of a lot of stuff, because I'm trying to remember our peak, how much we had borrowed, but I think it was around like $12 million borrowed, because we had like 20 different projects in different stages. And so, it was a lot. Mostly private investors. We had one kind of private equity company. It was two guys that like worked in private equity, and then they formed their own company, and they were backing a lot of our projects. But it was, we worked with some smaller banks. Lincoln Way Bank actually was one that funded a few of our flips. So yeah, it was just anywhere you could get funding from. My one partner, his job, that's all I did was just raise money. And I manage more of like the rehab side of things.
Did you have any strategy to where you guys were buying, or is it going where the deal was?
It was, we knew it was going to be the Chicago area, but it was really any suburb in Chicago.
Talk about acquisitions, right? It's a different time. You can pluck stuff off the MLS, but I'm assuming we still had other channels here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We did a ton of marketing. So like there was times where we spent $20,000 in marketing in a month on yellow letters. We ran Google ads, postcards. Those were our main streams of income, or main streams of marketing.
That's a whole operation in itself, right there.
Exactly. We had like a little call center in our office. And when I look back, like we were so inefficient. Like that's the problem too, is like you spend that much and you get all these leads coming in, but if you don't have like a really good system to follow up with them, there's so many leads that fell through the cracks that probably were deals.
You had a team of brokers too, or you had a whole office? Like talked about the kind of your office setup you had while you were going through that time.
Yeah, and I don't recommend, like after that experience, my whole philosophy was like zero overhead after that, because we created all this overhead because we thought we needed to look like a professional operation, and I think a lot of people fall into that in the beginning, all the vanity metrics, and it's all BS. Like, there's a lot of people that look really good, but show me your bank account. Like, and that was us. Like we looked good. Like we had a ton of flips going on. We had these sexy before and after pictures, but we didn't have, like, at the end of the day, we weren't getting paid a whole lot. And so, in terms of the office setup though, we set up our initial office first, which was basically a call center. Like it was, we hired, people to answer calls and try to scrape together deals. And then the realty company started because 𝗬𝗏𝗶𝗵𝘁, who I think really good guy, he was a paramedic at the time. My partner and I went to a real estate class. I think it was a Rich Dad class, actually. He and his dad are there. And my partner, I think we both were in suits at the time because, like, in the beginning, we, like, wore suits and thought we needed to dress up. Now I wear a T-shirt every single day. And I'm a lot more financially stable, too. So he thought, these guys are in suits, like they must know what they're doing. So we started talking to them. Yeah, exactly. It worked. So this is his first real estate class. He wants to get into it though. So he's like, what should I do? And we're like, well, just start finding deals. Like, and if you want to work with us, like, we'd be happy to work together. So he shows up like a few weeks later and he's like, I want to work with you guys. I'll help you find deals. So we were doing all this marketing. He wanted to become get his realtor's license. So he did. And he's like, I'll be a managing broker after you got to be, I think it's 2 years, right? You got to be a realtor. And so we're like, great. And we'll give you all the leads that don't make sense as a flip, and so you can turn those into listings. And so that's how we started. And he was hustling. We were putting up bandit signs. Like he and I would drive around, Friday nights, putting up bandit signs and stuff. It was just a hustle. We were all pretty young and didn't have kids and stuff. So it was, it was fun, but that's how the realty side started. So then 2 years later, he starts the realty side right next door, and he's grown that and done a great job with that since.
There's that level of scrappiness.
Yeah.
Like it still comes out like now we got to follow rules. Like now that we've grown bigger, it's like, hey, can't we just go do this? Like you can't do that anymore. But I'll tell you this, I went through my closet the other day. I threw away like 40 ties. Like I used to be that guy too. You need some leverage on this conversation. I need some leverage because you would literally knock on doors in 2002, 3, 4. And like, when they look at that, they need somebody on the other side to not look like a punk. Like, and like I would dress up every single day. Like now, like I said, like I had to contemplate, do I wear a hat today or not wear a hat? Like
the odds that we're both not wearing a hat right now is also,
I know.
We would have lost that bet.
Yeah,
like
You got to fake it till you make it in the beginning though.
Well, my goal is there's a number I want to get to, and I want to keep my Gmail account throughout the whole thing. Like I have .com accounts, but I still like on these bigger deals. I still love like, here's my proof of funds from my Gmail account that has my daughter's birthday in it. Like
my brother,
it's like intentional now.
Yeah, my brother when he used to get card, he used to give him their Blockbuster card.
For our listeners who are too young, Blockbuster was.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, so when you're doing all these flips here, when did you say like, all right, I need to own something?
Yeah. Took me 5 years because I'm a slow learner to realize that this just like isn't sustainable. And it was kind of like around the time I got married, and I credit some of that, to just getting married. And like all of a sudden, like I'm not just thinking about me like hustling, until I die. Now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, we want to build a family and a life together. And so we started getting pretty intentional about like, what does that look like for us? Like, what do we want our days to look like? What do we want it to look like when we have kids down the road? And I think that was really transformational because most people don't do that. Like, yes, people, their goals are like, yeah, I want to own 20 doors, or I want to flip, 5 properties.
Yeah, what does
next
that mean?
Yeah, like it's a vanity measure. Who cares? Like once you've done that, then what? Like, has your life changed? Like, how do you want to spend your days? And so, so we started thinking through that. We realized, okay, we want to actually live on a farm eventually. Like, we want to, be able to grow our own food, and we want to like, homeschool, and we want to do these different things. And I obviously I love real estate, but what I'm doing today isn't like leading me toward that lifestyle. And so we decided we wanted to move out to Northwest Indiana. And I realized I needed assets to start to provide cash flow to create that lifestyle. And so I went back, got a job. There's a nonprofit in Chicago I was super passionate about called Bunker Labs. It helps vets build businesses. And so they asked me to come on as a COO initially, and then the CFO. And that was growing like crazy. And so I took that job while we started building our rental portfolio then. And so did that over several years until we built up enough cash flow to just live off the cash flow.
Where? Like, that all sounds great, right?
Yeah.
But like, where everyone wants to do that.
Yeah.
Talk about like step one. Like, where are you looking with?
Exactly. Yeah. So initially, 2016, it was, I kind of fell into this niche. I found out from someone else, they're like, I'm doing these rentals to vets through this 𝗬𝘃𝗃𝗵𝘁 program. And I'd never heard of that before. So I looked into it and just went really deep into it. Like, how does this whole thing work? And realized it's very similar to Section 8, but it's designed for homeless vets. And so went to the 𝗬𝘃𝗃𝗵𝘁 office in Chicago. It's at the Heinz VA Center. Sat down with the lady that runs the whole program. And it's run by like 5 or 6 different social workers there. And just found out, like, asked her every question I could think of, like, how many vouchers do you guys get? What do they pay? Like, what's the main problems you experience? How many, what's the need? Like, just really wanted to understand it. And then I built the business around that. So she told me, like, here's about the number of, new veterans and new vouchers that will come through. She was ecstatic because, like, no landlords.
No one's soliciting her. Right?
No. She's like trying to find anywhere that homeless vets could rent, and every landlord's like, go away. And so I realized like the south suburbs, Country Club Hills, Hazel Crest, South Holland, all had really high payment standards for 𝗬𝘃𝗃𝗵𝘁 and for Section 8, but I was focused on 𝗬𝘃𝗃𝗵𝘁. So I started putting up bandit signs around there, finding deals and doing the BRRRR model on these properties and buying them really cheap, rehabbing them. And then she would reach out every time a new vet, I told her I'm going to focus on like 3-4 bedroom properties. And those are more rare for the 𝗬𝘃𝗃 voucher holders. And so she would just reach out and say, I got this new family, just came into the program. You know, do you want to house them? And I'd say, yeah, I got this new house. And so it worked out great. We built up a portfolio pretty quickly of 𝗬𝘃𝗃 voucher holders. And I had a rapport with them because, you know, being a veteran myself, and I was managing it personally. So like there was a lot of nuance to the way you do things, but because the business was kind of set up around that program, it worked really well. So that was initially how we built up cash flow. And then we moved to Northwest Indiana where it doesn't work very well. And that's when we got into short-term rentals.
Got it. Before going there, talk about screening.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a different, right? You're not just throwing something out there saying, I need a 650 credit score, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. Like,
Exactly.
how, yes, you have the money coming in, but they can still trash the place. They can still bring their friends over. Like, what's the screening process like? Because you don't have these cut and dry metrics to go off of.
Right. Yeah. You know, and you guys being professional property managers probably like wouldn't like you'd have more standard around this. Like I was kind of just, again, it was real scrappy in the beginning, just trying to figure it out as I went. And it was initially just like the screening like you have to overlook a lot of stuff. Like there's no, like they're homeless, so there's no previous
I can't get approved because I can't talk to your landlord.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to inspect their current living situation. There's probably no income, but the voucher would cover all their income initially. The main thing is that gave me comfort is that they have a social worker at the VA who is assigned to their case. And these social workers work hard. They're on it. So I could reach out to the social worker anytime if I had a problem with any issues. And the vets know that they don't, this is an opportunity. They don't want to lose the voucher. So it, you know, overall, it was actually pretty positive, like, you know, but I knew I was taking risks in terms of not the standardized screening. So you kind of have to overlook certain things. And there was a few that invited their, you know, extended family to live with them, and it was kind of a problem. But for the most part, they were good. And I knew I was buying these properties so cheap. I mean, at the time, I was buying properties for around like $50,000, putting another like 30 into it. So the properties are below 100,000, and the rent rate was like over 2,000 a month, you know? So it's like, even with the high taxes, and I'm buying relatively smaller properties to avoid the higher taxes. So the cash flow was really good. So it kind of compensated for the extra risk.
Now, do you still own there, or is everything, or do you sell those off now?
No, once we went to Northwest Indiana, we held on to them for a little while, but once we discovered this new strategy of doing these short-term rentals in lower cost areas, higher cash flow, it was just kind of a distraction to hold on to these properties. So I ended up selling them all just before it kind of blew up. And, you know, 2021, 2022, I probably should have waited a couple more years.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know there's probably a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm going 𝗬𝘃𝗃 right now.
Yeah.
It rolled underneath Section 8 and it's administered by Section 8 nowadays, correct?
It always was, actually.
But
So-
now it rolls right through CHA or rolls right through HACC. Like,
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think they go out to Hines anymore. I think it's
Oh,
if you get a 𝗬𝘃𝗃, it's the exact same process, same exact people as you deal with CHA.
Oh,
I
I
think
didn't know
that's something
that.
that changed the
Okay.
last couple of years.
that could change it then. If there's not that, because that social worker was key.
Because I think I heard about it for the 𝗬𝘃𝗃 first from you, and we found a couple pretty quick.
Yeah.
Or you know, it's one of those things that's like I saw these come through, but I had no clue what they were.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of skip them.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
application process, and then like I heard what you're doing, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
So we got a couple right away, and then it changed. The program
Huh,
changed after
interesting.
that.
All right, so where are we at in Northwest Indiana?
Yeah, so we moved from Frankfort, where we were living, to Beverly Shores, which is kind of like just on the southern tip of Lake Michigan. You know, we were rehabbing a house. It was a 1970s, all original, like shag carpet, wood paneling, like, you know, it needed everything. So we're rehabbing this house for us to move into, but it had this unfinished walkout basement. This is 2017, toward the end of 2017. And I said to my wife, I'm like, I keep hearing about people doing this Airbnb thing, and it seems like they're making good money. Like, what if we just put $30,000 into the basement, turn it into a one-bedroom apartment, and try it? You know, the worst thing that could happen is we've got more equity in a house probably, or we could rent it as a long-term rental. So we tried that, finished just before Labor Day 2018, and we booked out almost the whole summer just like in the first couple weeks. And I was like, this is insane, because we made just over $20,000 that first summer. And I had entire houses that weren't making that the whole year.
Memorial Day. I imagine you meant Memorial Day, right?
Just before
the first.
Yeah.
And then you booked out the summer.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Memorial. No, Labor Day's first, right? Or
No, Memorial. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're about to have Labor Day, so it's messing with my mind. Yeah. So just before Memorial Day, booked out the whole summer. And I was like, this is crazy income, like for a windowless basement to make more than a whole house. Like, what if we did this in a house? And so that's when we started to scale into Michigan City, which is our primary market, buying more affordable houses.
We just came from there. That's why I'm tan. Let's hear some streets. Up
Nice.
and down Lakeshore Drive there.
Nice. Yeah. We have a couple not too far from there. So our thesis that's worked really well for us is not to be in like the prime location where price points are super high, but just off that. So we're like more downtown or several blocks away from the beach, where property prices are a fourth of what they are on the beach, but nightly rates aren't that much different. And so your ROI is so much higher. And then we discovered that if you buy multi-units too, to where, we own a triplex or even a house with an ADU in the back, which are pretty common in that area, the cash flow is just off the charts. It's crazy. So that's what we started expanding into, and we've been building those ever since, or adding more of those to our portfolio ever since.
Yep.
Is there ever the fear about laws? Like New Buffalo, I think they don't allow them there. Like, is there ever any fear? Is that something you consider before you're buying, knowing the temperature of what the government's doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. New Buffalo, they made a rule several years ago to not allow any new ones. Okay. So they have licenses for grandfathered ones. I think you can transfer those when you sell it, but people who have the license, it's great for, because they just restricted all the supply, and that demand's still there. So so it can work in your favor, or it can work against you. But what I recommend is buying in a place where they've already made a law, because it's not like every year they're changing the law. It's rare to change it unless there's some major issue or something. So Michigan City had city council meetings. I was a part of a lot of them. I spoke at some of them when they're talking about the rules. And ultimately, like, the vast majority of people were for it, because Michigan City, it's a struggling industrial town. Like, they've had a lot of issues over the years, and now it's kind of making it a recovery, and a lot of it has to do with tourism and bringing in, and so they recognize that this is actually helping our economy. As soon as our guests check in, the first thing they do is go to the grocery store and go shopping, then they go to a restaurant, then they go pay for parking at the beach, like all these things that are bringing revenue for local business owners in the town. So it can definitely, like, you can get blindsided by it, but I always recommend make sure the deal works as a long-term rental first, and then, run the numbers as a short-term rental.
That was my next question. So all these could pencil out if you had to convert them.
Exactly. Yeah. You see these people buying $1 million properties that all of a sudden they can't do short-term rental anymore. And that applies to everybody in that area. So either everyone wants to sell at once, or you rent it as a long-term rental and hemorrhage a couple $1,000s a month.
I love that strategy of go somewhere where there's a rule set up already, because all the animosity that's built up to passing that one, they're probably not going to go through that again. That's huge. Like for here in Roselle, like they had nothing, and then someone got killed at a party, and then there's literally nothing, no more allowed at all. So it's like, if they had something in place, that they might have adjusted the restrictions or something like that. But that's great. I like that rule of thumb.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times they'll grandfather in existing ones too. So, people will try to fly under the radar. Like for Michigan City, you've just got to register at the city, and there's no inspection, no fees. Like, they make it very simple for you. But people don't even do that. And I'm like, well, if they ever change the rule and grandfather in all the people who have already registered, you're screwed then. So sometimes it pays to, like, follow some of the regulations there.
Yeah, no, I know some of those numbers. So 𝗬𝘃𝗲𝗏, who's a broker here, we gotta have him on. I think we've talked about this. We haven't, but I stayed at his place and he was telling me about the numbers. I was like, God damn, like, just completed like a 200K rehab on a 3-unit to like get the same numbers. Like, you just bought a lake house. Like, So, all right. So is everything now, are you self-managing these? Like you're the guy coming and you're in Valpo, right?
Yes.
How far, like how far is Valpo from Michigan City.
Yeah. So we moved. I mean, Beverly Shores is right next door to Michigan City, and
That's
initially,
like the tip. That's like the after Gary coming up the lake, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So initially, I thought I needed to be right down the street because I thought guests are going to call me all the time, and like, I need to be the guy to go like let guests in if they can't get in, or like Wi-Fi issues or whatever. And I did for the first year. It was like every Friday, it seemed like there was an 80-year-old couple that was checking in late at night, and they couldn't figure out how to put in their key code in the digital lock. And so I'd drive over there and it would ruin my Friday night. And then I realized this is crazy. Like, I don't need to be the guy punching in the key code. Like, there's somebody else in town here that could do that. So I started after the first year, I decided I'm going to treat these as if they're on the other side of the world. And like, what would I do in this situation if this came up? Because I know there's people doing this who are remote. So there has to be a way. And so we put in place a really good handyman and cleaner. I started screening people, and I hired 2 of them. I hired one who's like a really young guy, just handy. Like he was in the Army reserves, and so like was looking for something to do when he wasn't like deployed and stuff. And then the other guy was a retired union worker, and so just knew construction inside and out. Local guy in town. He's our main guy to this day. And we keep them almost fully employed at this point with all the properties, but they do everything, and then we have the cleaners who like will restock the cleaning closets. They'll do kind of extra stuff for us, like leave a note for our guests. They do all the laundry. But between those 2 people, they could handle all the boots on the ground activities. So there's properties I haven't been to in over a year that are 20 minutes down the road. So we moved then from Beverly Shores to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, which is, 20 minutes away. When we bought the farm, but the properties, we don't need to be there physically to manage them ourselves.
Yep. All right. So it sounds like you got this systematized pretty well, but give us a horror story. There's got to be one where it's like, God, like, give us one of those.
Yeah.
Humble yourself for a second.
Oh man. Yeah. There's been a few. I'll give you, there's 2 I can think of right off the top of my head. So the first one was when we're, just starting out, super excited about this one in our basement. It's working well. The guests come and go. People were like, oh, you want people in your house you don't even know. And it was like there's a door that locked between the 2 parts, and they could come and go as they please. They didn't even impact us. But my mother-in-law was staying with us one weekend, and the guest bedroom is on the first floor. They're staying, the guests in our Airbnb are in the basement. And it was like a 50-year-old couple that was there on their anniversary, and they were still very much in love. And they spent the entire night showing how much in love they were in a loud way. And so my mother-in-law's up all night, like listening to these people have sex all night. And she was not happy the next morning. So that's one issue that can come up that we didn't plan for. And then one, not this past Thanksgiving, but the Thanksgiving before, we just finished this huge rehab on this 2-unit, finished basement, and after the rehab, we didn't rot out the sewer like you should because, all the vines grow in the sewer. So our first guest checks in for Thanksgiving weekend, and we get this message like 10 a.m. Thanksgiving morning, like there's poop coming up from the floor drain in the middle of the finished basement. So that was not fun. But the good thing is, like, we were able to get an emergency plumber out there. They rotted it out that day. It was twice as expensive on Thanksgiving, but they were willing to come out. And the guest was super gracious. Like, they were, they're like, thanks for taking care of it so quickly, and gave us a 5-star review, even though they had poop coming up on Thanksgiving.
Like, are you crediting them back a night's stay? Like, how do you get past that?
Yeah,
and get a 5-star review. Like,
yeah. I mean, responsive, like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people don't understand is how much intent matters in this. Like, if you show that you care, that makes all the difference in the world. And I just saw this chart of like, man, I'm not going to remember what it's called, but it's like guest satisfaction. And it shows like the arc of a guest being satisfied if nothing happened. Like if you just take care of them from the start, there's no incident. But it shows like if there's an incident that comes up, like their satisfaction dips, but then it actually, like if you take care of it and you're really responsive, they end up being much higher and much more satisfied with their stay than the person who had no issue at all. Which
And
is
they'll
kinda,
talk about it.
Yeah,
That's the other
exactly.
thing, too. Like-
Exactly. So luckily, the upstairs unit wasn't booked that weekend. So we opened up the upstairs unit for them. So they had more space up there. They didn't have to use the poopy basement. And then, the fact that we got it taken care of right away, they were happy with that. So we did credit them some money too. I think we do that. You don't have to credit a ton typically, but like even just saying we'll pay for your breakfast as they're checking out, it goes a long way.
And I think that is such a good point to all of our listeners about that whole, for us, we might have a tenant lives with us 3 years and they never had a single work order. So they leave just kind of like,
Yeah.
Like, no, they're fine. I didn't really have to deal with them. I paid my rent and I was good. But you have these moments where it's like, hey, listen, that one work order we get in 2 years, like that's your one chance to actually be their hero or actually show that we're worth something. Like, and when we screwed that one time up, like we just scarred 3 years over like a lack of like 2 hour decision. Like we're too slow to make. Like it's such a big deal.
The other thing is too, benefit of the doubt up front, like being like on it right from the time they book. The communication is really good. The curb appeal is really good when they pull up to the house. Their first impression of what it smells like when they walk in, the cleanliness, all of that plays into how they will be the rest of the time. Because if that all goes well, as soon as they see a bug in the sink or as soon as something comes up, they're like, well, this place is great. It was just, a mistake, or they overlook it. You have the benefit of the doubt. It's built in. No matter what happens, it seems like you have that. If it goes the other way, you could present them with the Taj Mahal and they're like, yeah, but there's that speck over there in the corner where the paint's chipped and this place sucks, So it's like you win them over one way or the other up front, and then that's the way it's going to be the rest of the trip.
Yeah. How, are you still able to get deals out there? I know Michigan City, I know because I go there every summer and I pay more every time I go as a visitor. Like, I know pricing's going up over there.
It
Like,
is.
are you still finding deals? Like, is it still something you're full steam ahead at?
Yeah, absolutely. We're finishing up a really big rehab right now. But, Michigan City overall is just crazy inexpensive compared to the rest of the U.S. In general, and there's these pockets, like especially industrial Midwestern towns where that's the case. But it is more expensive than when I started. I bought a duplex for $22,000 when I was first starting and, put $100 into it. But I had a fully gut rehab property for $122,000 that, has been bringing in, it grosses on an annual basis around $75,000 a year. So, so I can't quite find those numbers anymore, but
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, our average property is, between $200,000 and $400,000 typically, depending on the size of the property. So, it's still really good numbers. And my target, and this is what I recommend to people, is to target 1% net. And so I kind of made up this rule based on the old 1% gross rule of buying, if you're based on the all-in price of the property, say it's $200,000, then you should gross $2,000 in rent per month. Like that's the 1% rule that everyone talks about.
And you're saying with Airbnbs, you can net that.
Exactly. So I don't care about gross because, that could all be eaten up by taxes and other expenses.
Real quick too, just one for the people who go from the long-term to Airbnb, the expense ratio changes dramatically.
Exactly.
Utilities are on you.
Yep.
You're paying for internet. Like things are a lot different.
Yeah, exactly. So let's use an example, $300,000 property. And we have one just like this. It's a triplex in Michigan City. We're all in just over $300,000. That property needs to bring in probably about $6,000-7,000 to net $3,000 because, like you said, like you got the cleaners to pay, you got utilities, you got your lawn, you got maintenance set aside, you've got mortgage, taxes, insurance, all that stuff has to come out before you're putting all the the cash flow in your pocket. So $300,000 property should net $3,000 a month.
Yeah, so that should be $36,000 in your pocket.
Exactly.
After everything.
After everything. Even set aside for maintenance, because people will be like, well, what about maintenance at the end of the year? And no, that's an expense. Like take out a percentage for maintenance. And it's really hard to do that with a single family home. Like those are like unicorn deals to buy something that cheap that nets that much. But with a small multi-unit, it's very doable. So, but if you think about what the power of that type of cash flow. I mean, extrapolate that out 10 years. You just created $360,000 of cash flow. That's if you don't reinvest that money. I mean, that's all money coming in. You don't have to wait 10 years to get that. That's money coming in. So you could reinvest that as it's coming in.
Well, that's what's so sexy about it being, it's kind of liquid.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's much more scalable than something just growing in equity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's just from the cash flow standpoint. If it appreciates 4% a year, compounding, at 4%, you're like creating about, $140,000 or so of value on that property. At the same time, you just collected all that cash flow, and your guests just paid off probably about $80,000 worth of your principal, which was an expense, but it was actually they're paying down your principal. So you created like $550,000 of value on a $300,000 property over a 10-year period. Like it really, it makes a ton of sense.
Yes. So let's use that example. That thing nets you 36, it grosses 75, or somewhere around there. Seasonality wise, like how much of that is Memorial Day to Labor Day? Yeah,
that's all profit. I mean, if you don't make your profit during those 3 months, and it's a little bit longer than 3 months, but it's the peak summer season. July, we'll have properties make $25,000 in a month, but that same property in January might make $3,000, in gross. Like it's crazy the difference in some of the properties. So what I see a lot of people do with Airbnbs is they say, well, I have a $200 a night property, and they list it for $200 the whole year. and it's incredible how many people do this when you look at the comps. And there's literally probably only like 2 nights a year where it's actually $200. The rest of the time, either you're undercharging and leaving a ton of money on the table, or you're overcharging and your occupancy is way lower than it should be because you don't know how to price it right. So, we have properties that, like, we have one called Big Blue. It's a house that sleeps 12 people. 4th of July weekend, it'll rent over $1,000 a month or $1,000 a night. A Tuesday in January, it's like $99 a night. So it's over 10 times as much on one night than it is on another. And you really have to understand supply and demand and what's available to not undersell it in the peak season and not oversell it, in the slow season.
I imagine there's got to be points in the slow season too where it doesn't even make sense to go that low based on like a big house like that you have to bring cleaners in that, you might as well leave it empty. It might be more profitable. Yeah,
you got to figure out what your lowest price point is. Typically, it is, for us, it's pretty low because the price point of the property is pretty low, and when you calculate out the occupancy, it makes sense to keep it occupied, but there is risk to that. So we really target midterm rentals in the off season because even if it's at a pretty decent discount, if you got 100% occupancy, that's still a pretty good income.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Shift in the midterm.
Yeah.
Cool. What's next?
Yeah, tell us about you've been doing the podcast for a while now.
Yeah, go ahead and get that out of it. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So tell us about that and why.
Yeah. So in 2019, I think it was. I had been wanting. This is another thing where it's like I deliberated on something way too long. I think I listened to my first podcast, 2013. It was Lewis Howes, School of Greatness. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. He still does it to this day. But I was like, this is amazing. I'm like hearing a masterclass from like this expert, and I'm like, this is so incredible. I want to start a podcast. And from 2013 all the way up to 2019, never had the bandwidth or just felt like I could do it. And so finally I committed to it in 2019. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And just started talking about what we were doing and interviewing really smart other people like yourself who just came on last week. And it's been awesome. I mean, I've learned so much from that podcast and been able to sit down with like Robert Kiyosaki, like if I just called him up and was like, hey, can I get an hour of your time? Like, he's probably not going to, call me back, but we have a podcast. So he came on and I was able to pick his brain for an hour, so that's the cool part, I think.
How much prep did you do for that? Because we haven't had him on, but we've had some where we're like, hey, we gotta go.
We can't screw this one up.
Yeah.
Like mine, you mean?
Yeah, like today.
Yeah, exactly.
Bags under my eye. We were up all night.
I know. It's all nighter. I did a lot because that was the 100th episode. So it still was, even after 100 episodes, it's fairly new. And he obviously got me started with real estate with reading that book. And so it was like a big thing for me, but it was the hardest interview I've ever done because guys like him, and maybe I'm just generalizing too much, but for him specifically, like there's no asking him questions. Like he's going to answer whatever question he wants to answer.
Yeah.
So you ask him about real estate and he wants to talk about Vietnam and he's talking about Vietnam. Like it's, so he's an interesting guy, and it was a difficult interview, but I did prep a lot for that one. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. So where can people find it?
Yeah. Living Off Rentals is the platform. And we've got a YouTube channel. We got the podcast. So if you go to livingoffrentals.com, it's on all the podcast players. We've got about 250 episodes now. So yeah.
Cool. Good stuff. Anything else you have? We're ready to wrap here. That's good. All right, let's do it. Wrap up questions.
All right. What's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do all this while so many people wish they could?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably just consistency, which doesn't sound sexy. But I think, like I kind of alluded to before, ignoring the vanity metrics and looking past those to really identifying what you want your life to look like, and then consistently every day just making effort in that direction. And I'll do the wrong thing for too long because I'm too consistent, I think, but that also helps you when you start to get on the right track. And a lot of people, like if you think about how many people who have done the same thing for 5 years, they're probably decently successful at it if they have, because there's just not a lot of people who stick with something that long. And just by sticking with it, you make a lot of progress.
I agree 100%. And it rings true. I just reread Atomic Habits, which I do like once a year, and it's so good. Just the little things every single day, and elongating that horizon.
The compound effect. That's another.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right, cool. What's one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property?
I would say, number one is to get really clear on what it is that you want out of that property. So a lot of people will buy real estate because everyone else is doing it, and it feels like, well, I'm buying this cheaper than the market, so it must be a good deal. Well, it might be a good deal for someone else. It might be a good deal for you. But if you identify what you want the result to be, do you want a certain amount of cash flow? Do you want appreciation? Do you, what's the next best alternative for the money that you're going to put into that property? So I think getting super clear on the outcome first, which for a lot of people, it's financial freedom and it's cash flow. And so I'd say if that's the case, don't get sucked into buying something that's like a sexy property just because you can get it a little bit cheaper. If it's not going to create any cash flow, it's not getting you closer to your goal of financial freedom. So a lot of people don't have clarity there.
All right. What do you do for fun? I remember that one every time.
It's funny because I find like business fun, and I find personal development and fitness and stuff like that fun. Like improvement is fun to me. So I think that can also be a trap though, because I just heard somebody talking about this concept of productivity debt. So like people who are really like ambitious can tend to get in this cycle where, you wake up every morning and you've got this to-do list and it's like you're in debt to yourself. And so you hustle all day long just to get to a place where you've knocked all this stuff off your list and you're back to even, just so that you can start back over again, and so you can start to feel like you're just like killing yourself over time. And so it can be a slippery slope in terms of like self-development and stuff. But I find joy in that, and I find, I enjoy that. But in terms of just like shutting it off and enjoying life, I think college football is something I'm super into. I love. So I think that's what I would do. I don't watch enough of it. It's not like I sit down on a Saturday and
it starts this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited.
Who's your team?
Army's my team just because I went there, but I just love big matchups, in the Big Ten or SEC, like just watching rival games. It's awesome.
It's on one of the to-dos on the bucket list. I need to go to an Army-Navy game.
Yeah.
The atmosphere there looks awesome.
They are fun.
I read Coach Prime's book a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
You're calling him Coach Prime. So, all right. Give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you'd recommend to our listeners.
Yeah. There's one I just listened to recently that if you want to learn more about finance on a deeper level, 𝗦𝘁𝗶𝗵𝗁. You guys know?
I don't.
Yeah, he did like he's big in the tech world, but he did this like tweet storm of like all these tweets that are on finance that are just like super smart tweets, and so that was turned into a video, and I think it's called How to Be Rich. But if you just search 𝗦𝘁𝗶𝗵𝗁 tweet storm, it'll come up, and that just watch that. It's like a couple hours, and you will understand finance at a much deeper level. It's awesome.
That's really good. And then I think it's the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, or whatever. That book is amazing too. Like,
oh really?
That was one. I'm like, man, I wish I had this book 20 years ago. Like,
nice.
Let's link to both those in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Besides yourself, name one resource local here in Chicago you refer to other real estate investors.
So I got a buddy. Do you guys know 𝗬𝘃𝘃𝗀𝗵𝘁? He's a buddy of mine. He owns a company called 𝗬𝘃𝘃𝗀𝗵𝘁, and we kind of got started. He was actually a watchmaker who immigrated from Bulgaria, was interested in real estate, so he just showed up again at our office one day, start working in real estate. This is like 2012. He and his wife Lori, they're great, and he's built out an awesome business. Great people, and he does rehabs for others. So if somebody's looking to do a flip, like if I was in Chicago flipping, I would just use him. He's amazing. So 𝗬𝘃𝘃𝗀𝗵𝘁 is the name of the company.
Let's link to him. We'll appreciate an intro. Immigrant watchmaker turned real estate mom. I'm in.
Yeah, he'd be a great guest on the show too.
So, all right, Kirby, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the best way to find out more about like my whole investing style is livingoffrentals.com/start. There's a link to a masterclass I just did recently that just walks you through my whole process step by step. And I put in there a ton of examples of recent deals that we've done or that people I work with have done, because like people talk about like, Airbnb, and they talk about like deals in 2020, and it's a different market. So, you got to make sure it still works today. And so if you want to like understand the whole philosophy, I think that's the best place to go to.
Good stuff. All right, we'll link to that in the show notes. We end with our Chicago fact. Mark, who are we playing for? Who is our sponsor?
Oh, we're playing for 𝗦𝘃𝗲𝗃𝗍, who bought a t-shirt at the Straight Up Chicago merch store, and our sponsor is 𝗦𝘃𝗃𝗀𝗁 Law. So Kendall, if myself or Kirby get this question right, you get $50 gift card brought to you by Chance at 𝗦𝘃𝗃𝗀𝗁
Let's
Law.
split Chance $50 in debt here. Let's do it.
This is a lot of pressure.
Yeah. All right, so you're gonna get 4 choices. You guys are gonna be you're gonna be at 50% off the bat. So I did not know this one, but you know Chicago history more than me, Mark. So maybe you got it. So George Bugs Moran, huge gangster bootlegger. He was probably Capone's biggest rival. What was George Bugs Moran's actual first name? And your options are Adler, George, Marcus, Mahan.
I'll go with Adler.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
My second would have been George. I would have just said this is a trick question.
Yeah, we probably should.
I've yet to do a trick question on you yet.
We should pick two different choices.
Yeah, we got to pick two different.
Well, I guess I'll go with George then. So
You cover your bases?
Yeah.
It was Adler. Nice work, boys.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Nice.
I knew one of those Irish gangsters was Adler. All right, awesome. All right, Kendall, thank you for purchasing the t-shirt. StraightUpChicagoInvestor.com merch store. We'll get you a $50 gift card brought to you by 𝗦𝘃𝗃𝗀𝗁 Law. That was awesome. We got the question right. I'm so happy. I would tell you, it always makes my day.
Yeah.
Kirby, thanks for coming on. Tom, thanks for always. Listeners, watch these episodes on YouTube now. Like, this is cool. Like, I know for me, I actually enjoy watching our shows more so than I do listening to them anymore. So, YouTube.com, we have all of Straight Up Chicago Investor. We have all of them on there. We have all the Tuesday tips on there as well, too. So check it out. And we're live from the underground right here. So, Kirby, thank you. Tom, thank you. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
That's
Thanks
awesome.
all.
Thank you.